you are the go-to person to explain the difference between erotica and romance.
Oh,
so
wow.
you got it. I mean, you're the one that's really promoting. There is a difference.
I believe there is a difference,
very big
yes.
difference. Can you tell us kind of your take on erotica versus romance?
Sure. Well, I would even split it up a little bit further and say that there's a difference between romance, erotica, and erotic fiction.
Okay.
And for me, romance is the main thrust, if you will, of the story. Is the romance. It's the story of two people falling in love,
Right.
or in some cases more than two people, depending on what you write.
That's a double T on that one.
Wow. And but the main focus or point of the story would be the couple falling in love, or the people falling in love, and that's the point of the story. It doesn't matter whether they're on a spaceship, they're chasing bank robbers, they're in a Western, they're falling in love. That's the point of the story. Erotica, for me, my opinion, is that the story is more about the sexual element, and it doesn't have to be a romance. There doesn't even have to be any love. Sometimes there doesn't even have to be affection. At least that's what I found. It can be very much just focused on the sexual elements of it, the sexual theme or the sexual hook. And the language is often much more graphic, and the situations are much more graphic, although you can have romance that's graphic as well.
Right.
And I write what I feel is erotic fiction, which is a story which is not necessarily about the sexual element, but that's also a very big part of it. And there's a little bit more than just the sex to it.
Well, at one time, erotica was a little bit, behind closed doors. Nobody really talked about it. It's gone much more mainstream, if I will. You go into bookstores, you see it displayed prominently, people talk about it. Can you talk to me a little bit about maybe the evolution? Who were some of the people that maybe you're following in their footsteps? Because the doors really were put open earlier. There's not a whole lot that hasn't been done before. So who do you maybe look to?
Well, I am going to have to say that I don't really look to anyone, because I started writing what I write specifically because I wasn't really necessarily finding what I wanted to read, which was a combination, which was something that was not erotica, where it was all sex, 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 and there wasn't much else going on, and romance. Although I do write erotic romance and erotic fiction, but I wanted a story where I didn't have to end it, or I didn't have to make it all about them falling in love. For me, it was a lot of my stories, especially for Spice, are more heroine-driven. It's more about the characters' struggles and what they're going through, but it often has a sexual element to it and graphic language, which I love exploring that. And I love writing love scenes and sex scenes. So when I was starting to write for Spice, or before Spice actually was existing,
right?
Some of their guidelines, their early guidelines said the story of O, and I had read a book for 9.5 weeks. If you've, I don't know, a lot of people have seen the film.
Right.
They haven't necessarily read the book, which I could read that book. I could read it. It's maybe 200 pages long, and the problem with it was I was reading a lot of erotic material where it seemed that the characters were punished for having good sex. Something bad happened.
No, and there was this kind of stigma, maybe even as early as like in the 80s, where it was like the women who were enjoying sex had to be punished in some way. They had to have something taken away from them or something.
Or they lost something. Or I remember I read a book because it had been touted as great erotic fiction, sizzling hot, and it was a fine story, but it wasn't sexy to me because everybody ended up broken and sad, and so I wanted to write books where the sex was the healing element, or it somehow changed the characters for the positive.
Right.
And at least I tried to do that, and that was what I was looking to read. So I'm not saying that it never existed before. I just wasn't finding those books, and so that's why I wrote Dirty, because I wanted a book about a woman who used sex, and it didn't. It helped her. She went from a dark place to a good place with sex, rather than she ended up being destroyed by it.